We start in the Middle East. The Gazan Health Ministry has reported a sharp rise in civilian casualties as Israeli airstrikes continue to hit the Strip. In one strike, 9 of a Gaza doctor's 10 children were killed when their home in Khan Younis was bombed. Her husband and one child survived but was injured. In Al-Mawasi, a designated humanitarian zone, at least 5 people were killed and 50 wounded in an attack while they were gathered around a truck carrying flour, also confirmed by the health ministry. 4 more people were killed in another strike in the tougher area of Gaza City, while Israeli raids continued in Deir el-Balah. The health ministry adds that only 92 aid trucks have entered Gaza in the last 3 days. This statement comes as Israel claims that 107 and 83 aid trucks have entered the enclave in the past 2 days, respectively. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that a teaspoon of aid is being let through when a flood is needed. Let's listen in to the EU chief's comments.
Palestinians in Gaza are enduring what may be the cruelest phase of this cruel conflict. For nearly 80 days, Israel blocked the entry of life-saving international aid. As the world's leading hunger assessment found, the entire population of Gaza is facing the risk of famine. Families are being starved and denied the very basics, all with the world watching in real time.
Meanwhile, Arab foreign ministers met their French counterparts in Paris to push for a Gaza ceasefire and urge implementation of a 2-state solution. A global conference on this is planned for June in New York. On the other hand, more than 50 hostages, both dead and alive, are still being held by Hamas. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Ross Feingold, a political risk analyst who's joining us from Taipei. Ross, thank you ever so much for being here. Of course, the situation in Gaza we know has worsened since military operations were resumed by Israel, but we have seen somewhat of a shift amongst global leaders. We heard comments there from the UN chief Antonio Guterres. Why do you think there has been a clear shift from some world leaders in terms of a response to Israel for the ongoing offensive?
I think you just used the key word, which is ongoing. And the situation, if we go back in time, 6 months, a year, there have been previous predictions of a famine in Gaza. The war went on. There was a brief ceasefire. The problem for Israel that it has to confront is that the situation is ongoing. Israel is continuing to prosecute the war against Hamas. But in the meantime, civilians are caught in the crossfire. And of course, supplies that have been existing have been trucked in during the previous ceasefire. No surprise that they're dwindling. And we see global opinion, other than the United States, which is firmly in support of Israel still, but global opinion, especially in Europe, is shifting against Israel.
Absolutely, Ross. Some discrepancies between the amount of aid that Gaza and different bodies have said has gone in compared with Israel. Of course, aid is a huge concern with fears of starvation. Do you think pressure needs to be put on these organisations and also Israel to make sure that that aid does get in before an extreme situation? Of course, the US said that they were going to be involved in some form of aid distribution. Could the US be involved in further talks surrounding that?
Well, there was the US-Israel plan to distribute aid, which the UN and other stakeholders said they want no part of, so that is at the moment very much in doubt. Part of the challenge is Israel says it lets the trucks in, but then do the goods actually get distributed to the civilians who are in need? And that's part of the challenge in a situation where hostilities are ongoing. We shouldn't forget the fact that we're talking about how to distribute aid when very close by to where civilians are, Israel and Hamas are engaged in a shooting war. There's hostilities ongoing. And one of the big concerns from Israel, and they've made this abundantly clear, is that they want to make sure that any aid that enters Gaza and gets distributed goes to civilians. It's not stolen by Hamas. And no one's really come up with the perfect solution to that problem, absent having a ceasefire again, which at the moment doesn't seem like it's going to happen despite on-again, off-again talks.
Yes, Ross, there has been a report that on Friday 9 children who were the children of a doctor working in Gaza were killed, 9 of the 10. Reports like this have been verified. This one was verified by the BBC. Given the amount of death that's being seen amongst children and also women as well, do you think that there could potentially be a change in approach from Israel, given that condemnation that we've spoken about, which world leaders seem to be sort of joining along with the aid blockade that was in place? Do you think this will change Benjamin Netanyahu's plan of ultimately controlling the whole of Gaza, which is something he's repeated recently?
Up to now, international criticism or the number of children or females who have died in the war, that has not changed how Israel goes about fighting Hamas. So I would have to say we need to look at the past and see that Israel does not change the way it conducts the war, notwithstanding the civilian deaths, including women and children. And even international pressure or Israel's image taking a hit hasn't really changed how Israel goes about conducting the war. Israel would say that this is up to Hamas. We could solve this if Hamas would surrender, lay down their weapons, and depart Gaza. Now, Hamas is not willing to do that, and we're stuck in the same situation.
Absolutely, and another key part of that for Benjamin Netanyahu and his government, of course, is the hostages. Over 50, we know, dead and alive, still being held by Hamas. Of course, the devastation this is causing within Israel and across the world as well. Do you think this is a factor that might sway Benjamin Netanyahu's thinking? He's resumed military activity in Gaza following that ceasefire that was agreed at the start of the year. Since then, only 1 hostage released. Do you think a different change in approach might see more hostages released, or is this now just a way in which Netanyahu sees Hamas being got rid of, potentially with collateral damage of further hostages dying?
The interesting thing there is that there's a lot of domestic criticism in Israel by families of the remaining hostages, by other members of the public. They've held many protests. They've been very vociferous in their view that Netanyahu's way of conducting the war is wrong. He should stop. He should reach a ceasefire and get those remaining 50 hostages released. But Netanyahu and his government, they don't agree. They're immune to the international criticism, and they're certainly immune to the domestic criticism, it seems. And they're going to continue to conduct the war until they feel that Hamas is militarily defeated, with the hope that when that point in time comes, that Hamas will release the remaining hostages. We're not there yet. It's clear that Hamas still has retained a fighting capability, so Israel and Netanyahu's government continues to fight the war.
Ross Feingold, as always, thank you so much for your insight. We, of course, will be across all of the developments from Gaza and the wider Middle East as we get them. But we move